Interfusal muscle fibers are the skeletal muscle fibers that serve as specialized sensory organs, also known as precipitators. These detect the amount and rate of change in length of a muscle, and they are innervated by both sensory and motor fibers. Extrafusal muscle fibers are the skeletal standard muscle fibers that are innervated by alpha motor neurons and that generate tension by contracting. Therefore, they allow the skeletal movement in everyday movement, such as walking to the bus stop or doing a slight bit of exercise. Gamma motor neurons, which are seen on the diagram, or in every labelled neuron area, control muscle contractions in response to external forces acting on the muscle. In response to external forces, the gamma motor neurons can bring forward and induce the involuntary reflex movement, which is called the stretch reflex. This brings us on to the definition, which is that another factor is the stretch reflex, and it's within the muscle spindle apparatus region, which can be a monosynaptic reflex, which provides an automatic regulation of skeletal muscle length. This is important in many sporting applications because it causes an unconscious decision for the muscle to move as the length is signalled, whereby the signal entering the spinal cord arises from a change in muscle length or velocity. When a muscle lengthens, the muscle spindle is stretched and its nerve activity increases. The stretch shortening cycle, which is also known as SSC, refers to a muscle action which happens when the active muscle lengthening is immediately followed by an active muscle shortening. This can happen in many sporting activities, for example, in tennis. Doing a serve, the biceps will be stretched out when the racket is pointing in the air ready to hit the ball, and then this will be followed through by catching it over the shoulder when the muscle contracts to bring it back over. This combination of eccentric and concentric contractions is one of the most common types of muscle action during locomotion. The stretch shortening cycle is comprised of 3 phases, which is eccentric, amortizational, and concentric. Generally, elastic energy is the mechanical potential energy stored in the making up of material which is subjected to elastic deformation, which is when it can't turn back to its normal shape. Elastic energy occurs when objects are immediately compressed, stretched, or generally formed in any manner. Next, plyometrics are exercises in which muscles exert maximal force in short intervals of time, which is very important for sports in which require energy for like a short amount of time. For example, shot put, really strongly propelling the shot put over in a short amount of time. The plyometrics have a goal of increasing the power in the muscles. Now moving on to the Golgi tendon organs. So it's basically the opposite of the muscle fibre, in which it serves the purpose of muscle contraction. A precipitative sensory receptor organ that it's basically that senses a change in muscle tension. When a Golgi tendon organ is stimulated, it causes its specific muscle to relax by interrupting its contraction. When a muscle is inhibited by a Golgi tendon organ, the process is called autogenic inhibition. The function of the Golgi tendon organ generally can be thought of as opposite to the muscle spindle, as it serves the purpose of muscle contraction. The stretch reflex is a muscle contraction which will happen as a response to the stretching within the muscle of the fibers. It's a monosynaptic reflex which provides automatic regulation of skeletal muscle length, and when a muscle lengthens, the muscle spindle is stretched and its nerve activity will increase. Autogenic inhibition refers to a reduction in excitability, which is how much it works for a contracting or stretched muscle that in the past has been just for the increased inhibition inputs from the Golgi tendon organs within the same muscle. As seen here in the graph, which was taken from our own investigation, it's clear that as time goes on, we start quite high with our power output, but as time goes on, the muscles begin to fatigue and the line plateaus and then decreases, which suggests that as time goes on, the muscles lose energy, ATP becomes less created, and the power decreases. And now finally for energy systems, so we're going to be talking about ATP in muscle contraction, lactic acid systems in ATP conduction and ATP production, muscle contraction and PC system. So ATP is a chemical energy store which produces energy. It provides energy to drive many processes by the mitochondria, which use oxygen from aerobic respiration to produce this store. The scientific name for ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and is a biological way to store and use energy, and it allows the muscles to be able to function, because it wouldn't be possible without any energy source. In a cell, it needs to get energy, and the bonds between the ATP break to form ADP and a free phosphate. There's a theory called the sliding filament theory, which explains how energy is produced from ATP. The breakdown of ATP releases energy, and then it allows the myosin, which is in the filaments of the muscles, to pull the actin filaments towards inwards and towards us, and so shortening the muscles. This process happens across every myofibril in the muscle cell. The myosin then is caused to detach from the actin, and the cross bridge is broken when an ATP molecule binds to the myosin head, and this is the sliding filament theory, which involves ATP. ATP is mainly held together by high energy bonds. For this reason, making these bonds requires a lot of energy for them to be made. Therefore, the process is an endothermic reaction, as it takes in the energy to produce the bonds. The opposite is when the bonds are broken, which is obviously an exothermic reaction, and the energy is given off, which is due to the breaking of the bonds. After energy is released due to the breaking of the bonds in ATP, there's a need for the ATP to be resynthesized after the breaking of it. As energy is released, the ATP is broken down, and the energy is therefore required to resynthesize it. The byproducts of its breakdown are adenosine diphosphate, which is known as ADP, or another substance called PI. Cardiac muscle is responsible for contraction of the heart, which allows blood to pump through each of the four chambers, the right and left atrium and the right and left ventricle, and therefore this will supply the body with oxygenated blood it needs. A pacemaker is found in the upper right atrium, which sends out an electrical impulse into the vessels, which triggers the start of the blood pumping, but the cardiac muscles keep this action going as they contract and relax in order to maintain the movement of blood. In a marathon run, the action is incredibly important. The heart will have to keep contracting quickly in order to pump oxygenated blood around the body for as long as possible and into the muscles, which is needed by the mitochondria to produce ATP energy, which enables the person to keep running. ATP is very important because it transports the energy necessary for all the cellular metabolic activities. PC stands for phosphocreatine, and it is important in the ATP resynthesis. This, along with the lactic acid system and aerobic system, work by producing energy like a recharged battery to allow muscle contraction. PC stands for phosphocreatine, and it's a molecule that allows quick mobilization reserve of high energy phosphates, which stimulate energy in the skeletal muscle and the brain to recycle adenosine triphosphate, which is the energy currency of the cell. The muscles in the body use phosphocreatine in the first few seconds of an intense muscle contraction. This could be in shot put, for example, as I said, where a quick, sharp burst of energy is needed to propel the put, which with the maximal amount of energy. And another example is sprinting, where a lot of energy is required for just a short amount of time. However, the body is required to excel quickly, which needs a large and quick burst of energy. Unlike aerobic contractions, which use oxygen to propel itself, phosphocreatine uses the production of energy without the input of oxygen. Therefore, it's an anaerobic reaction and process. Phosphocreatine splits due to creatine kinase in order to produce ATP energy and therefore allow fast action to occur after the breaking lets out ATP, which is energy, and therefore causes muscle contraction. There is enough PC in the muscle cells to continue to resynthesize ATP for about 8 to 10 seconds of physical work. This can be at any demand, and the advantages of this system are that energy is released quickly and there are no waste products formed. There are many different demands on this test which were performed. The exercise causes the heart to pump blood into circulation more efficiently as a result of more forceful and efficient myocardial contractions conducted due to the need in more oxygen delivery to muscles, increased perfusion of tissue, organs with blood, and increased oxygen delivery. Aerobic exercise trains the heart to become more efficient.